The day had stretched on longer than usual, a slow, exhausting drip of hours filled with small setbacks and mounting pressure. I shuffled down the cracked sidewalk toward the old apartment building where I lived, the one place that felt like a refuge, even if it didn't always feel safe. The sun was dipping low now, spilling a soft amber glow over everything, but it did little to warm the cold knot of worry tightening in my chest. I kept my eyes on the chipped paint of the building's front door, hesitating just outside. Rent was overdue again. I knew the tight smile she wore whenever she brought it up, but today, the weight of it made my steps falter. I swallowed hard, fingers curling around my jacket pocket as if holding on to something solid might steady me. Then, just as I reached for the handle, I noticed her leaning casually against the brick wall beside the entrance. She hadn't made a sound approaching. How she managed that I never knew. But there she was, the landlady, confident and composed, like she owned not just the building but the whole block. Yet there was something quietly vulnerable in the way she stood, as if the hard edges she presented softened when no one was looking. Her silhouette was framed by the fading light, and the warm amber tones seemed to settle on her like a soft halo. Her dark hair was loosely pinned back, a few strands escaping to brush gently against her jawline. I caught a faint trace of her perfume, a subtle mix of vanilla and cedarwood, that mingled with the scent of old bricks and dusty leaves. She didn't speak at first, just watched me with eyes that held more than a hint of knowing. The silence between us stretched, not uncomfortable but heavy with things unsaid. The way she leaned on the wall, one shoulder slightly raised, one foot crossed over the other, felt almost casual, yet deliberate, like a challenge and an invitation all at once. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, steady, and edged with a softness that caught me off guard. "Your rent may be late," she said, "but if you're willing to beg, I might just forgive you." The words hung in the air between us, weighted with something beyond mere money. There was an unspoken understanding in them, of struggle, pride, and maybe even a little hope. I blinked, caught off guard not just by what she said but by the way her gaze held mine, steady and patient. I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't just about the rent anymore. It was about how long I'd been trying to keep my head above water without asking for help. About how, maybe for the first time in a long while, someone saw me, really saw me, and didn't turn away. My fingers loosened their grip on the jacket pocket, and I took a hesitant step forward. The roughness of the brick pressed gently into her back, grounding her presence like an anchor. A sudden breeze whispered through the alley, carrying with it the distant hum of the city waking up tonight. In that small moment, caught between the fading day and the growing dusk, the space between us felt charged, not with anger or judgment, but with something warmer, more fragile. Something like the quiet beginning of trust. I cleared my throat, trying to find the right words, but they tangled awkwardly in my mouth. The silence stretched longer than I expected, and for a moment I thought she might turn away, dismiss me like so many others had before. But she didn't. Instead, she shifted slightly, the soft scrape of her shoe against the cracked concrete barely audible, and gave me a patient look, something that felt like an invitation, though I wasn't sure to what. I'm sorry," I finally managed. My voice was quieter than I wanted it to be, barely above the rustle of a distant car passing by. "I've been behind. Things haven't been easy lately." The words felt too small to carry the weight of everything I wanted to say, but it was all I had. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head, eyes narrowing gently, not in judgment but in attention. Her arms were crossed loosely over her chest, but the stance didn't feel defensive. If anything, it felt like she was bracing herself, waiting. There was something in the way the light caught the subtle lines at the corners of her eyes, the way her lips pressed into a thoughtful curve, that made me realize she was holding back too. Maybe something more than words. A guarded kindness that hid its vulnerability well. I shifted on my feet, suddenly aware of how close we stood. Her presence was warm and steady, a stark contrast to the cold evening air slipping under my jacket. The faint scent of her perfume, vanilla, maybe with a hint of something woodsy, was stronger now, curling around me like a quiet comfort. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but hesitation tangled my limbs. Instead, my sleeve brushed accidentally against her forearm, a brief, unintended touch that sent a flicker of something unfamiliar through me. Something electric and tentative. She didn't pull away. For a heartbeat, our eyes locked. I saw something flicker there. Surprise, perhaps, or maybe a recognition of shared struggle. The space between us shrank, but the unspoken rules of this dance held firm. Neither of us stepped forward nor back, caught in a delicate balance of hesitation and hope. "You don't have to explain," she said softly, voice almost a whisper now. "I know it's hard. More than you think." Her words settled around me like a quiet embrace, and I realized this wasn't just about rent or money. This was something deeper, an unspoken empathy forged by experience. I swallowed again, my fingers curling into fists at my sides. Pride was a stubborn thing to let go of, especially in moments like these. But beneath the awkwardness, beneath the embarrassment, I felt a fragile thread of trust weaving itself between us. She glanced away briefly, just long enough to reveal the shadow of a smile before she looked back, steady and sure. "You're not alone," she added, almost as if convincing herself as much as me. The weight on my chest shifted. Lighter now, but still real. I nodded slowly, words failing me. Our breaths mingled in the cooling air, steadying in rhythm, as if the universe itself was pausing to watch this quiet exchange. Around us, the building creaked softly in the settling evening, the street lamp casting long shadows that flickered across the cracked pavement. Somewhere nearby, the distant hum of life carried on, but for that moment, it felt like just the two of us existed, standing close but still apart, dancing around the fragile boundary between need and pride, silence and confession. And somewhere in that hesitant dance, something unspoken began to take shape. The silence between us deepened in a way that felt less like emptiness and more like the quiet before something important. She shifted her weight again, leaning a little more heavily against the rough brick wall. The texture of the weathered surface pressed softly through the fabric of her jacket, grounding her in the moment. The evening air had cooled further, but somehow, the space between us seemed to hold its own warmth, soft, unspoken, inviting. Her eyes met mine with a look that was part challenge, part invitation. I felt the weight of it settle over me, heavier and more complex than the simple fact of late rent. She was testing something, or maybe offering something fragile and precious in return. I couldn't quite tell which, but the quiet intensity was undeniable. "Begging, huh?" she said, her voice low and steady, carrying the faintest trace of a smile, something almost teasing, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You might be surprised how often people get that wrong." The corners of my mouth twitched, the ghost of a smile threatening to break through my nervousness. I had imagined so many ways this conversation could go. Scolding, anger, dismissal, but not this. Not this strange, careful tenderness wrapped in a playful challenge. Her gaze softened, and she took a small step closer. Not enough to cross any invisible line between us, but close enough that I could see the delicate curve of her jaw, the faintest shimmer of gold in her eyes catching the lamplight. There was a grace in the way she moved, measured, confident, but also a vulnerability, subtle and easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. "If you want to make it right," she continued, voice dipping even lower, "it's not about just swallowing your pride. It's about being honest. About showing you're willing to trust, even when it's hard." Her words settled over me like a soft blanket, warming a place I hadn't realized was cold. The idea of humility wasn't new, but the way she framed it, less a demand and more a doorway, felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first time, I sensed an opening, not just to make amends for what I owed, but to start something different. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and faint traces of jasmine from a nearby garden. It brushed past us, tousling a stray strand of her hair that had escaped the clasp. I reached out without thinking, tucking it behind her ear with a tentative touch that surprised me with its tenderness. Her eyes met mine again, wide and steady, as if she'd been waiting for that moment too. The warmth of her skin beneath my fingers sent a quiet pulse through me. Nothing rushed, nothing desperate. Just a steady thrum of something growing quietly between us. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, as if acknowledging a secret we both now shared. "You don't have to beg for my forgiveness," she said softly. "Just show me you're willing to be seen." Her words echoed in my mind as the city lights began to flicker on one by one, casting a soft glow around us. The evening was settling in fully now, wrapping the world in shadows and light, mystery and promise. For the first time in a long while, I felt something shift inside me, an unfamiliar but welcome hope that maybe, just maybe, this late rent was more than a problem to solve. It was the start of a new kind of connection. The night had fully settled around us, soft and still, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Instead of parting ways, we found ourselves sitting side by side on the narrow concrete steps leading to the building's side entrance. The world felt distant here. The hum of distant traffic faded into a gentle background murmur, replaced by the quiet rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. I noticed how her posture softened the longer we sat together. The rigid lines of authority she wore during the day seemed to melt away in this intimate quiet. Her shoulders relaxed, and her hands rested lightly on her lap, fingers weaving a slow, unconscious pattern. She glanced at me, then away, a flicker of something private crossing her face, something like relief, or maybe a trace of sadness. I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of the moment pressing gently against my ribs. "It's been hard," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not just with money, everything, trying to keep it together." Her gaze returned to me, steady and patient. "I know," she said simply, "more than you realize." That sentence hung between us, not an empty platitude but a truth drawn from her own experiences. In that quiet admission, something shifted, a crack in the walls we both built to protect ourselves. I looked down at my hands, the rough calluses and worn edges suddenly feeling like badges of survival. "I didn't want to ask for help," I confessed. "Pride, I guess, but it's been harder than I thought." Her voice softened, carrying a tenderness that caught me off guard. "Pride is a strange thing," she said. "Sometimes it keeps us safe. Sometimes it keeps us trapped." I lifted my eyes to meet hers again. The street lamp cast a warm, golden glow that made the fine lines at the corners of her eyes shimmer softly, like whispered stories waiting to be told. For a moment, I imagined the years behind that quiet strength. The losses, the victories, the lonely nights she must have faced. "Do you ever feel alone?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Her laugh was soft, almost shy, but genuine. "More than I'd like to admit," she said. "But loneliness is different when you choose it, isn't it? When it's a quiet companion, not an unwanted guest." The breeze lifted a loose strand of her hair, and without thinking, I reached out to brush it back behind her ear. Her skin was warm beneath my fingers, and the contact was electric in its simplicity. Neither of us moved away. Instead, the moment stretched, delicate and unspoken. We sat closer now, the small space between us narrowing with each shared secret, each whispered truth. I could feel the steady rhythm of her breathing, the soft pulse at her wrist as she rested her hand near mine. The night wrapped around us like a fragile cocoon, quiet, safe, and full of possibility. I realized then that this moment wasn't about rent or money anymore. It was about two people finding a rare kind of understanding, one that didn't need words, only the courage to be vulnerable. And in that fragile silence, something began to bloom, a slow, steady promise of trust. The cool night air wrapped around us like a soft blanket, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine from a nearby garden. We sat together on the worn concrete steps, close enough that the warmth of her presence seeped into my skin, but still careful not to cross the unspoken boundaries between us. A sudden breeze stirred, playful and unexpected, and it tugged at the loose strands of her hair. I watched as a wayward lock slipped from its delicate clasp, fluttering softly against her cheek. Without thinking, my hand reached out on its own accord. My fingers brushed gently against her skin as I tucked the strand behind her ear. Her skin was warm and smooth beneath my fingertips, the faint pulse of her heartbeat subtly echoing through her wrist, just inches from where my hand lingered. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow until it was just the two of us. The soft rustling of leaves, the distant city hum fading into silence. Our eyes met in that instant, wide and unguarded. I could see the flicker of surprise and something else, something softer, more vulnerable, hidden deep within her gaze. It was as if the touch spoke what words could not, bridging the invisible gap between caution and desire. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned just a fraction closer, her breath warm and steady against my skin. The faint scent of her perfume, the subtle mix of vanilla and cedarwood, surrounded us, wrapping around me like a quiet promise. I felt my pulse quicken, a gentle rush that wasn't born from nervousness but from a deep, growing connection. The air between us was charged with something tender and fragile, an unspoken acknowledgement that we were moving toward something new. She shifted slightly, the soft brush of her sleeve against my arm sending a shiver up my spine. Her eyes searched mine, silent and sincere, asking a question without words. I wanted to answer, to close the distance completely, but something held me back. A mixture of respect, hesitation, and the slow unfolding of trust. Our fingers brushed once more, this time more deliberately. The touch was light, almost tentative, but it sent warmth flooding through me. It was a conversation without speech, a delicate exploration of feelings that neither of us was quite ready to name aloud. The night seemed to hold its breath with us. The street lamp's glow cast soft shadows across her face, highlighting the subtle curve of her cheek and the gentle swell of her smile. I wanted to reach out again, to let my hand linger a little longer, but I waited for the moment to come naturally, for the slow burn of something real to take hold. In that quiet space, I realized how rare and precious this feeling was. It wasn't about grand gestures or rushed declarations. It was about the small, meaningful moments, the brush of skin, the meeting of eyes, the shared silence that said more than words ever could. Her gaze softened, and she gave the slightest nod, as if giving permission for this delicate dance to continue. My heart settled into a steady rhythm, matching hers in a silent harmony that felt both new and familiar. For the first time in a long while I felt seen, not just as a tenant or someone struggling to pay rent, but as a person, flawed, vulnerable, and quietly yearning. And in that touch, that fleeting connection, something beautiful began to take root. The night had grown deeper, and the city around us faded into a soft blur of distant sounds. Muted car engines, footsteps echoing faintly, the occasional bark of a dog somewhere far away. But between us, everything felt vivid and immediate, as if the world had shrunk to just this small patch of cracked concrete steps and the quiet exchange we shared. We sat close now, the space between us narrowing but not quite disappearing. It was as if both of us were waiting for what neither of us fully understood yet. I could feel the subtle tension humming beneath the surface, a mix of hope and hesitation that tangled in my chest like restless shadows. Her gaze was steady, but I could see the flicker of doubt and uncertainty flickering just behind her eyes. She had the strength to hold herself together through everything life threw at her. But in this moment, I sensed a crack, something fragile that she kept carefully hidden from the world. "I don't want to make this harder than it has to be," I said quietly, voice low and uneven. "I don't want to risk whatever this is, if it's even real." She looked at me then, really looked, as if trying to read the truth behind my words, behind the hesitation and the fear. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from my forehead, her fingers light and deliberate. The touch was a lifeline, a silent reassurance. Her hand lingered for a moment, warm and steady against my skin, grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. "Real isn't always easy," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's worth the risk." Her words resonated deep inside me, but doubt still clung stubbornly. I swallowed hard, feeling the vulnerability rise like a tide. "What if I'm not enough?" I confessed, the admission raw and unpolished. "What if I can't give you what you deserve?" A flicker of sadness passed through her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by something gentler. Compassion, maybe, or understanding. "You're more than enough," she said firmly. "More than you realize. Sometimes the right person sees the parts you hide, the parts you don't even know are there." Her words were both balm and challenge. I felt the weight of my own fears pressing against the fragile hope she offered, and for a moment, I wondered if I could let go. Could I trust her? Could I let her see me, all of me, without shame? The night air was cool against my skin, but inside, a slow fire was kindling, quiet, steady, and impossible to ignore. The space between us felt electric, charged with all the things we couldn't say aloud. The longing, the hesitation, the promise. She reached out again, this time resting her hand lightly over mine. The contact was soft, deliberate, and it spoke volumes. I felt the warmth of her skin, the steady pulse beneath her palm, and with it came a sense of safety I hadn't felt in a long time. In that simple touch, the walls I'd built began to crumble. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, and I leaned in just a little closer, just enough to feel the quiet strength of her presence beside me. There was no rush, no sudden leap, just the slow unfolding of something tender and real. A connection born not from certainty, but from the courage to face the unknown together. And as the night wrapped around us like a gentle embrace, I knew this was only the beginning. The first light of dawn crept softly over the rooftops, painting the world in gentle shades of pale gold and rose. The city was waking slowly, but we remained seated on the cool steps, wrapped in a quiet cocoon of shared presence. The night's tension had dissolved into something warmer, something steady and real. She shifted slightly, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face with a tenderness that caught me off guard. The soft touch felt like an unspoken promise, an acknowledgement of everything we had spoken and everything we hadn't. I realized how close we had become, not just in proximity, but in trust. The barriers that once felt so insurmountable were now mere whispers in the quiet morning air. I reached out, fingers trembling just a bit, and gently took her hand in mine. Her skin was warm, reassuring, the steady pulse beneath her palm a soothing rhythm that mirrored my own. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to be fully present, to feel the quiet strength of connection without fear or doubt. The weight of past mistakes, missed chances, and late payments felt lighter, softened by the kindness and understanding she offered so freely. "You don't have to be perfect," she said softly, her voice still carrying that warm, steady calm that had held me through so many difficult moments. "None of us are. But you're here. You're trying. And that's enough." Her words settled around me like a gentle embrace, filling the spaces where uncertainty had lived. I squeezed her hand lightly, a silent thank you for seeing me, not just as a tenant or a responsibility, but as a person deserving of care. We sat like that for a while longer, the quiet between us no longer heavy but full of possibility. The morning breeze carried the faint scent of blooming flowers, mingling with the lingering warmth of her perfume. It was a small, perfect moment, one that felt like the start of something new. When she finally spoke again, there was a softness to her smile that made my heart lift. "If you ever need more than just a roof over your head, you know where to find me," she said, the invitation gentle but clear. I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude and something deeper. Hope, maybe, or the first stirrings of something beautiful and unexpected. "Thank you," I whispered, voice thick with emotion. "For everything." She reached up then, brushing her fingers lightly against my cheek. A touch so delicate it felt like the closing of a chapter and the opening of another. Her eyes held mine, steady and warm, full of quiet promise. As the sun rose higher, casting a soft glow around us, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. No grand declarations, no rushed confessions, just the slow, steady unfolding of a connection built on trust, respect, and genuine care. The late rent, the struggles, the hesitation, they were part of the past now. What mattered was the here and now. The shared glances, the gentle touches, the understanding that sometimes The most meaningful relationships begin with a simple act of kindness. And as we stood to face the new day, hand in hand, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest. A promise that this was just the beginning of something real, something lasting, something worth every moment of hesitation and hope. If you enjoyed this slow burn story of unexpected connection and quiet courage, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next chapter. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What moments resonated with you the most? Drop a comment below and let's talk about the beauty of patience and vulnerability in love. Thanks for listening and see you next time.